She made this diagram of a clock, and she sent it. And she's making the suggestion that to the Dennison Manufacturing Company, dear sirs, I went down yesterday on purpose to investigate your buildings. I found you have just one thing wanting, a large clock. You have everything around your buildings that is beautiful, but you have to go by your buildings to see them. Now you have room for this clock on your, wait a minute, sorry. She made this, okay. For this clock on the stack of the chimney. By putting it there, it would be facing the town. It would not only be benefit to you, but a large one to the town. I think it would bring you in several $100s in different ways. And she signs it, yours, Hazel Leland. I am 12 years old. So, like I said, we found many, many, many business things, but we found a lot of personal things, notes and letters that came from children, that came from other people, always making suggestions for the Dennison. So it was a personal and a business archive.
Does it say what year that was?
Does it say, yes, you're right.
1902?
May 21st, 1904.
Yeah. For a 12-year-old to send that letter, a suggestion, and to even make the diagram of the clock.
And did you say that the numbers are all letters that spell Dennison?
I'm sorry, I didn't say that. Yes. That's how clever she was with her.
Hi, my name's Joanne Meyer, and I had a chance just to spend a couple of days going through the material, getting my hands dirty, and believe me, our hands are really dirty after hours there. And I have to say, I almost missed this one. I spent most of my time looking at letterheads of various correspondence, more for the artistic merit of the letterheads than the content. And actually, the content of many of the correspondence was kind of dry, right? But this one this letter I pulled out because of the letterhead, and it's from the Tuskegee Institute, which at the time was called the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute. The letterhead itself wasn't that fancy, but as I showed it, I think it was to Sue and Pat, they said, well, take a look at the signature. And it's signed by Booker T. Washington, okay? Dated, this one, 1910. We continued to go through, files nearby where this one was found, and I think there are a total of 6 letters from Booker T, correspondence between Booker T. Washington and Charles Dennison, the president at the time. And the correspondence was about Charles Dennison being interested in placing a girl he knew. We're not sure how he knew her, but she was from Florida, looking for a place for her at the Tuskegee Institute. And come to find out, looking into the files a bit more, we actually found some letters from the young girl to Charles Dennison. So probably, 15 letters in total between the 3 of them. So it gives you some of the flavor of more personal correspondence, and just the fact that Booker T. Washington and Charles Dennison at the time took the time to write about this young girl. It was pretty amazing. So I think you have several of them in here, right? Yeah.
All right, well, everyone's probably wondering what these boxes are. E.W. Dennison is generally recognized as the founder of the Dennison Manufacturing Company, but he gave the credit to his brother Aaron Dennison, who was a watchmaker. And if you know of the Waltham Watch Company, that is the descendant of the company founded by Aaron Dennison. When Aaron Dennison was making his watches in the first half of the 19th century, he was very frustrated because he couldn't get a decent box made in America. And so he bought materials and took them up to Maine to his family and asked his father if he could make some boxes on his cobbler's bench. So that was really how the Dennison Manufacturing Company started, making boxes for watches. And in time, they were making more and more elaborate jewelry boxes, and then they started making tags, and I think most of you know the rest of the story. But we found one carton that had some early jewelry boxes in it, and this is a plush jewelry box. It says, given to Mrs. Lyon, Lulu Dennison, on her birthday in 1881. And I'm going to ask Kevin to hold this. You can see what beautiful condition this is in. We don't have the jewelry, just the box. And this is also an early box made in 1881. It was made by Miss Abby Nason, Nason. So this is the first time I had ever seen anything made by Dennison for which we actually had the name of the person that made it, and that was very exciting to me. Who found this Bloomberg card? We all shared these treasures as we found them, and everyone was excited about them. And sometimes we don't remember who originally found what. But this was a postcard sent to the box committee at Dennison by Steve Higgins, who was a member of the box committee. He had just been a passenger in this plane, which was the first scheduled transcontinental air transport trip. And the pilot was none other than Charles Lindbergh. So this was a pretty special find.
Was he on business data when he was doing this?
Well, Pat found the article in the round robin, and
I don't think so. I think the purpose was to take several people across in the transatlantic flight, not transatlantic, transcontinental flight. And some of the people that greeted them, Amelia Earhart was there, the Fords. So it was quite an event. You know, there were two legs to it, I believe. And then they were met in California, and then he came back the regular way, I guess. This is called the tag waltz. And Susan and I discovered this. We had a whole box of checks, and Dana had been through them, and we had looked at the top of it, but nobody had been to the bottom. So it pays to dig down to the bottom of things. So we took out all the checks, and that was folded over, turned over at the bottom. We pulled it up. It's called the Tag Waltz, and it was published in 1895 for the 50th anniversary. So, I mean, it was like a treasure. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was looking in a round robin, and in the middle of the page, they featured the cover of this. They were showing it to people in the factory in the history room. And I had looked at that round robin 3 or 4 times. I never noticed it. But once we found this, I thought, how did I ever miss that before? I think they did it in the 1924 round robin. They featured that for the staff to go and take a look at the history room. So
Can you sing us a few bars?
I don't think you'd want me to. I think you wouldn't want me to.
We have an app that we can play the piano on, and
I think it is a piano piece. We need to find someone that would play it. It comes from New York, so I'm not sure if the person that created it was actually in the Dennison. Yes, and it's copyrighted particularly for the Dennison, yep.
Dennison always seemed to include music as part of their celebrations. The tag waltz was 1894. It was 1 year after this very elaborate dinner. They had a shareholders dinner every year, and it was usually in Boston. This was before the factory moved to Framingham, but this was the 1893 dinner. It was extremely elaborate, and one of the chief features of the entertainment was 12-year-old Henry S. Dennison playing the violin. And there's a photograph of him in here, as well as the music that he played. They had very elaborate programs. There's 12-year-old Henry Sturgis Dennison. And this is the piece by Claude de Berriot that he played. He was a very accomplished violinist, apparently. And then after dinner, there were further entertainments. There were 14 Greek tableaux. And as you can see, these are, we looked at the names, and these are the wives of the executives who got dressed up in these classical robes, Greek costumes, and posed themselves. One thing that came up earlier was that Dennison executives and designers always had their fingers on the pulse of the times. So these women were well-read and very much aware of the art of the time. And when I looked at these photographs, I said, these are so much like a pre-Raphaelite painting. Just for fun, I'm going to pass these around. These are some pre-Raphaelite paintings, and you can see where these women got some of their ideas from the tableau. They put a great deal into those dinners. Good one, Pat! Pat asked if the dress is made out of crepe paper. That is a very good question. This was 1893. At that time, Dennison was importing its crepe paper from England. Just a few years afterwards, Dennison started to make its own top-of-the-line crepe paper, and it was in the teens and 20s that they were promoting it at 30s for use for parties, costumes, and so forth. Oops. This is one of the pieces that Fred Bastian gave us. It's a salesman's sample, and it includes a catalog of crepe papers. So you can see this is a costume made of crepe paper.
Variations of crepe paper were used for bandages in World War I, and then later, I think in World War II, to wrap ordnances and bullets and different things like this. And I thought, crepe paper? And we did, it's not here tonight, but I did open up this weird envelope with this really weird, sort of greasy, very pliable paper. And that was a sample of the crepe paper used to wrap bullets and other weaponry for World War II. And I would have never have realized that it was the crepe paper and all the industrial paper that Dennison also made.
That's great. And just to throw this in, another thing that evolved from the crepe paper much later was diaper liners, and that was a surprise to me. But it was Ralph Maish, a former executive, who told me about that. One of the things that we found, of course, in huge numbers were tags, because that was what Dennison was known for. And Susan, you found a lot of samples of tags. Would you like to talk about or show people some of the samples that you found?
When you get a chance to come up and look at what's on the table here, this booklet, it's a salesman's sample, and this is 1906. And when you look at the quality of the paper and you look at how vibrant the colors are, and this is over 100 years old, and it's been packed away, and we found salesman samples books and catalogs of their products as early as, I would say, the 1860s, some of them, and they're all of this very good quality and good color. And here's another sample of tags. And a very interesting with this is there's a Wallace Nutting tag here. And you probably all know Wallace Nutting, who made furniture in Framingham, and he was also a photographer. But we did find one of his tags in the sample books. But the other thing about the samples, about the tags, it also shows what a wide range of products that they used tags for, and they were from all over the country and from all over the world. People were buying tags and labels. And even the plain tags that would, maybe the baggage tags, we found information about how they would make the samples, whether the corners would be round or whether they would be squared off, or whether the little eyelet that would hold the string, about the quality of that, so it would actually work on, you know, baggage that people were using to travel. So it's very interesting. So when you get a chance to come up, look at all the different samples. And this is a Christmas sample of things that they sold in 1906.
Thank you, Susan. Before we leave the subject of tags, I'm going back to the shareholders' dinners again. This was the menu in 1902. Does anyone know, can anyone explain the significance of the shape of this menu?
The tag holder.
Yes, absolutely right. This is the reinforced ring that made the Dennison tag famous. And of course, portrait of E.B. Dennison, the founder, in the middle.
So that's a menu data?
This is a menu.
Yeah.
They had blue points, bisque of oyster crabs, celery, olives, and salted pecans, fillet of halibut surcouf, tomatoes, supreme of chicken, aux truffles, pomme lorette, petit pois, fresh mushrooms sous cloche. That means under a bell. I can't imagine what that looked like. Frozen Tom and Jerry. Oh my goodness. And then redhead duck with oriental salad, Alaska souffle, fruit jelly, fruit cheese, and coffee.
Dana just showed you this very interesting, which was from their banquet, but they had many recreational things for their employees, and one thing was a baseball team. They had a very active baseball team, and this was the symbol on their baseball uniform. So they carried it through with everything.
One thing, too, that I'd like to mention is, along with all the products and the fact that Dennison traveled all around the world, they were involved. Mr. Dennison was involved in a lot of work, government-type work, and two things that we did uncover was during the time of Prohibition, he was on a committee to try to figure out how that could be enforced, and they traveled all over the country to different factories and all sorts of places. We actually found 45 folders just filled with all the studies that they did that later was compiled into a book. And one other thing that I found fascinating was 2 folders called Industrial Spies, and that really perked me when I saw that. And what happened around the time of the First World War, that there were many people that went into the factories as industrial spies, and not just looking to see what was going on there, but to kind of, their point was, I think, to tell the owners that they would help the factory run better if they knew more about their employees. But it actually caused more trouble, and Mr. Dennison studied this for a long time, over, I would say, a 10-year period, and at the end, he wrote up things about what he thought the results of, he called it a bad period of time. And a lot of books were written at that time as well. So he worked with other people developing businesses like the Filene's brothers and people from other parts of the country, and that was the consensus they came to. But when I saw that old folder, it really perked me up. I thought, this sounds very intriguing, and something good could be written about it. One of the things about Dennison is they really knew about their employees. They were kind to them, and they worked with them. It was almost like a family. They called them the Dennisonians. So they were all included, but I think maybe all factories or all workplaces weren't that way. And so these spy groups, that's what they called them, but they were detective agencies. And they billed themselves as companies that would come in and just help employees know what was going on in general in the factory. So if there was a problem, they'd bring in someone as a worker, but it's really a person from outside who would then inform the owner what was going on in the factory or whatever the place of employment was. So I guess the industrial spying is not an unusual thing. I think it came into more current history too, but looking more for products, but not watching what people in the factory was doing, what they were doing. So it was really kind of an interesting phase. Pardon me?
How many employees do they have?
Good question. I don't know.
I know they had about 3,000.
Yeah, thousands. Yeah.
Early in the 20th century.
Yeah, so it was big, really big. Well, we'll look at modern things now.
All right, well, it is.
Do we have time? No.
8 o'clock. I don't
Okay.
know if any of you have questions.
Yeah, maybe
Seems as
we'll
though
do
we've
that.
done most of the talking.
Three things that you didn't cover, which there's many things you didn't cover, but the significance of the Dennison Memorial Auditorium, the Civic League, and what was the life of the bowling alleys?
The what?
The bowling alleys that they had there?
Oh, the bowling alleys.
Is that at the Civic League or?
No, that was Dennis,
At the Dennis-
across the street. Like, yeah, with like where.
Susan?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. We know they're there.
Right.
We just knew they were there.
Yeah. I know they were operating, I worked in teletype in, let's see, 65, and they were still in operation then. I wondered how long they had been there.
I think Mr. Dennison did research on civic leagues in general, because we did find a booklet about the Boston Civic League, so I think that they were looking for information on how that should be run. And we wondered about that second building that's down there that's called the Dennison Building, and that was named after E.W. Dennison. It was a memorial building in 1919 that was built at that particular time to honor him, 100 years after his birth.
Yes, I was wondering, actually about 10 years ago, I talked to a woman who is a professor of industrial. She had written a paper about the workers at Dennison for a trade magazine, and she was the one who originally, I believe, alerted me that there was this whole several rooms up on Dennison Hill that were full of, and she was worried that it was going to be lost. And this is about 10 years ago. I think I kind of dropped the ball on it, but I think I gave her name to somebody at the Historical Society. But do you think much has been lost? Because if it was moved up to California from the Hill, and she said there was like 3 rooms full of stuff.
Well, those of us who worked there, I think we all agreed that it's definitely 3 rooms full of stuff. But it was in a warehouse, so of course it was just in one area.
There must have been like 30 filing cabinets, and it was how many pallets? Like 24 pallets? You know what a pallet is?
Yes.
24 pallets of stuff, and it was piled up of boxes and filing cabinets. So I imagine the vast bulk of it was there. I don't think.
This professor said she thinks she was the first person who would ever get in that room since the stuff was put there. And I don't know when that was, when the hill was built, but she was amazed. It was just a huge amount of stuff, and it didn't look like anybody had ever been in there. She said it was just full of cobwebs and dust, and they didn't know what to do with it. Nobody had the key in the beginning. She had to go through a lawyer to even get in there, because nobody there had the key or knew what it was until.
So did she actually go through that stuff?
Yeah, she wrote it. If you Google Framingham Dennison a certain way, she's at, I want to say Marquette, somewhere in the Midwest, nowhere near here. But,
Do you know how long ago? Do you know how long ago it was?
I've corresponded with her, and I can't think of her name right now, but it was a trade magazine, and she did a study of something about industrial workers using the Dennison as a model, and she went through everything. And she found personnel files and everything.
No, it was a huge amount of stuff. Of course, when the Avery bought it, the merger happened in 1990, so that was 23 years ago now. But I think that's when a lot of this sort of got lost. I don't know when the Dennison family divested of it. But the stuff in this collection goes up through at least the 70s. There's stuff in the 80s now. I think there's a little bit from the 80s. So they definitely, so they were definitely still adding to it, at least in the 80s. So I suspect it was when Avery came in that, everything got.
There are some very large portraits in frames. We're not sure what's the best use for them because we're in a small space here and we just can't store all of them. But if anyone has ideas for those portraits, we'd love to hear from you.
Probably in the Denison Building.
In the what?
Probably a place in the Denison Building. Memorial Building.
In the memorial building. Well, if the town would take them.
So one interesting thing about A.W. Dennison, of course, he was the father of the watchmaker, and he was the father of the brother who ended up running most of the operations. Of course, the tags and everything moved to Roxbury. I don't know when they moved the factory, but the boxes were still made up in Brunswick. And one of the things we found was a letter from the son to the father saying, we'd really like to consolidate the operations down here. You got to bring the box factory. The father says, I'm not moving out of Maine. So they waited till he died, and then they brought everything in. So that's sort of the downside of a family business. You got to wait for your father to consolidate it. But another interesting thing I found was from much later. It was from the 50s, and it was the memoranda of the meetings of the design committee, the art department. They had a design committee here in Framingham, and they also had one in New York, in their New York offices. And the New York offices, in this particular memo, was complaining that the people in Framingham would always complain that their designs were too Fifth Avenue and they wouldn't sell. And they say, they're very defensive about that. That they were, had to answer the people in Framingham. So it was kind of interesting, sort of the corporate culture there.
Do you have any furniture or any of the items that had been in the executive suite?
In our executive director's office, we have Henry Dennison's table.
Don't we have his chair too? Isn't the chair?
And we have his chair on exhibit in the old academy.
Interestingly, he did have some Yankee Values. Hannah Dennison, his granddaughter, gave us that chair. She also gave us the money to conserve it because it was in pieces. And it had been repaired before. So it's not the most glamorous chair, but we do have it on exhibit there if you'd like to see it.
Did you research on finding these files? Did you see anything more about the possibility of the UN being in this area? There's reference to that in the history of Framingham.
I know about that, but did you find anything, Susan?
We did find something on that. I don't, Dennison were very much against it. Now, I don't remember where those, Dawn, where are those letters? But we did find some information, and when we get back to getting everything in order and displaying it, and we'll definitely get back and find it. But we did find information about it. I remember reading it. Yes.
Have any Dennison descendants found out that at least part of the archive has come back to town? Are they aware of the fact that all of these boxes have been saved from our factory?
I hope so.
Okay.
We have one right here.
There you are. There you are. Please stand up and introduce yourself.
My great grandmother was Buckley Dennison on my father's
The answer is yes.